What's up, Node.js developers? Welcome back to a new live stream. Super excited about today's tutorial build because I've been preparing it for more than 80 hours and I'm pretty sure you're gonna love it as well. Today we're gonna work a lot with media libraries, with photos, with videos, because in today's video, by the end of this tutorial, we're gonna build a Google Photos clone in React Native using Expo, Supabase, and ImageKit. The main features of today's project are going to be working a lot with local media library, and the important part is going to be to implement a backup system so that we can upload the local images to the cloud and then use them and view them on different devices. We're gonna build it for both iOS, Android, and for the web as well, so that we open it on the mobile, we back up our photos from the mobile to the cloud, then we can open the Google Photos applications on the web and view the images there. For that, we're gonna have to work with image and video optimization so that we can deliver optimized images and videos for every single platform. The tech stack for today is going to be, as I said, React Native using Expo. We're gonna also use Expo router for the navigation. On the backend, we're gonna use Supabase to allow users to authenticate, to create an account, and from the Supabase, we're also going to use their storage and the database and API to manage our assets there. For the image optimization and media optimization, we're gonna use ImageKit, which is the sponsor of today's video. If you don't know about ImageKit, ImageKit is a media processing product that helps you stream, transform medias for mobile and web, both images and videos. And what I like about ImageKit is that they have their own storage, but they can also connect to your existing external storage if you're already using S3, Google Cloud, or even Supabase that we're gonna show you today in a bit. With ImageKit, we can use their transformations URLs that they provide more than 50 transformations so that we can optimize, scale, resize, crop, rotate, and even more advanced transformations such as AI-based cropping, watermarking, and this allows us to deliver the best and optimized media for the device that these images will be loaded on. They offer SDKs for all the popular frameworks, and today we're gonna use the React Native SDK, and we're gonna also use their generous forever free package to integrate and optimize our images on React Native. More about the integration a bit later. Meanwhile, you can view and create an account following the link in the description. And in a second, we're gonna integrate that in our application. So, if you're ready, we can get started, but before that, here is a quick demo of what we're gonna build. Here is the photos in the Google Photos clone that we're gonna build today. The photos are loaded from the media library, and they are actually already backed up in the cloud. We can go ahead and then view them. They are delivered optimized from ImageKit. And for example, these first photos, they are not yet synchronized. So we can press this button and synchronize it and back them up in the cloud. We also will implement automatic backup so that all the files one by one will be backed up in the cloud, and later on we can view them from any device or even delete them locally and view them only from the remote. Everything can be viewed in our storage on Supabase here. Every user will have their own folder with protected files, and in the database as well we're gonna have the assets with their metadata here, as we can see. So let me know if you're ready. Let me know where are you joining us from. As always, I'm really curious to see the geography of our live stream. And if you're ready, we can slowly get started because we have a lot of things to build today. I think I overkill with this tutorial because we're gonna build so many things, and a lot of these things are quite advanced, but I made them super simple for everyone to be able to follow along and implement it together with me, because I believe that's the best way to learn, is actually getting your hands dirty and building along, building together, getting into those problems and then solving them together. That's how we learn. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and open up a terminal because we're going to initialize a new project. I'm gonna go ahead and navigate to the folder where I usually keep my projects, somewhere here. It should be 0823. Here we go. And I'm going to zoom in a bit so that you can see better. To initialize the project, I'm gonna use a tool called Create Expo Stack. So I'm gonna run npx create expo stack, and I'm gonna also add at latest to take the latest version of this CLI. This is a tool that allows us to initialize an Expo project with some default packages, and it will speed up a little bit our starting point so that we don't start from a scratch, from empty project, but rather we're gonna have already some libraries set up. Let's go ahead and give our application a name. I'm gonna call it Google Photos. Would you like to use TypeScript? Of course, we'd love to use TypeScript. We're gonna use npm here. Let's select Expo Router as the navigation library, and let's also select the tabs, the second option, because we're gonna have multiple tabs here at the bottom, as you can see on my demo. I'm gonna select tabs. For the styling, I'm gonna go with native wind. However, if you don't have experience with native wind, you can also go with style sheet, because our application doesn't have a lot of styles. Like, it's pretty basic. Like, we're gonna only style some images. So it doesn't really matter what styling library we're gonna use. I'm gonna choose native wind, which is, if you have experience from the web, this is Tailwind made for mobile, for React Native, and it allows us to use class names to style our components instead of writing JavaScript styles. I'm gonna show you that in a second. For the authentication, let's select Supabase here because we're going to use Supabase for authentication. And for EAS, we don't need the setup yet. And let's press no, and this will initialize the project. You can also run the command create expo stack with these properties: Expo Router, tabs, native wind, and Supabase, and you're gonna have the same starting point as I do. And if you're new here, guys, if you're new on this channel, hello, my name is Vadim, and at notjust.dev my mission is to help you build impactful mobile applications. I do this by creating these long project-based tutorials that I show you how to build real applications from start to end, both on front end and the back end. A lot of our content is around React Native and mobile development, and if you're interested, make sure to subscribe to this channel not to miss our future videos, because we are just getting started and it takes a lot of time to prepare this project, especially this one. Spend more than 2 weeks preparing it for you. So a subscribe will really mean a lot to us. Anyway, our project is already set up. Let's go ahead and open it in our editor of choice. In my case, that's Visual Studio Code, so I'm gonna open it with Code, Google Photos. This will open up Visual Studio Code. Now I can close the terminal because in a second we're gonna open the terminal right in Visual Studio Code. So before we jump into the files, let me actually go ahead and open a terminal because I want to start the project and see what do we have there. To start the project, I'm gonna run npm start. This will start the Metro server. I'm gonna stop it from the other place where I have it. Just to make sure that I only have one instance running. Come on. And I'm going to press I to open it on the iOS simulator. However, if you don't have the iOS simulator or an Android emulator, the easiest way to run this project is going to be to download the Expo Go application on your physical device. It's available both for iOS and Android. And then simply scan this QR code and it will open in your application. You're going to be able to develop this way. However, I'm going to use the iOS simulator so that we can see it here. And indeed, we have the application running on our simulator. It has two tabs, as we can see at the bottom, tab 1 and tab 2. On tab 1, it also has a model here. And if you're interested where this is all coming from, this is coming from our app folder. The app folder is very specific to Expo Router, and Expo Router is a file-based navigation system. So by simply creating files in this folder, we are defining screens. So just a little trick that I'm going to show you, by simply copy-pasting the file 2 here, we're going to see right away, come on, it should work. The third tab appear in our bottom tab navigator. So that's how simple it is to work with Expo Router. We create files, we export components here, and then Expo Router sets up the screens based on the structure of our folders and file that we have here. If you have experience with other file-based navigation system like Next.js on the web, then this is going to make a lot of sense. For us, what we are interested in is basically in this index.tsx file, because this file is the one responsible for the tab 1. As we can see, if I'm going to go here and, for example, for the title, change this one to photos, we should see right away at the top the title of the page changing to photos. If that's happening, then we are in the right place and we are ready to start working on this page and building our first screen that will display a list of images from our media library. So let me go ahead and probably delete this container altogether. Probably we're not even gonna need the styles because I'm gonna show you how we can style with native wind. I'm gonna delete this import of screen content. And from React Native, I'm gonna leave it like this because maybe in a second we're gonna need to import some things there. I'm just gonna delete I'm gonna leave it empty, the import. So now we have a blank screen, and here is where we're gonna build the next steps. Let me go ahead and I'm going to keep track of all the commits as checkpoints so that you can look back later and see step by step how we build this application. I'm gonna give you the source code as well. Let me do git commit, init, and cleanup. Very simple. Okay, so I hope now we have an application and we are ready to start working on it. What we would like to do first is working on this photos screen. If you remember the photo screen, I don't have it here. Let me check the actual photos. No, this is iOS photos. Do I have here Google Photos? I have it from the old one. So let me actually run the example so that I can reference like what we're trying to build, and it's going to be easier for you to visualize and understand like what is our goal for the next step. Give me just 1 second, and I'm gonna run it on iOS. iOS, come on, open it. It's for some reason it's loading the previous one. But why? Let me try the other way around. Give me just 1 second. I'm gonna stop this server. I'm gonna stop the previous one. I'm gonna first start the demo. And in the demo, let me make sure that it's loading from Metro. Yes, now we have the photos here so that I can show you what we're trying to build. And then I'm gonna start our project that we are working on a different port. And from Expo Go, here we should have it. It still connects with a, with a previous one. Okay, let me see. In Expo Go, we have running the new one. Here we have the old one. Perfect. So our first goal is going to be to display this grid of images. But where they are coming from? These images, we are loading them from the photo gallery of our application. If I open the photo gallery, that's the images that I have here. So we need a way to read the photo gallery, the media gallery from the phone. In Expo, we have the Expo Media Library package that gives us access to the media, to photos and videos from the device. So, provide access to the user's media library, allowing them to access their existing images and video from your application, and as well to save new ones. Let's go ahead and follow the installation guide and try to integrate with the phone's media library. I'm gonna copy this command to install Expo Media Library. We're gonna go and open back a terminal and go ahead and press on the plus sign to open a new terminal so that you have your server running here, and in a new one we can install Expo Media Library. Okay, we added a new package. We can go back to the documentation and see what do we need to do. In terms of configuration, this is not needed for development, but for production, we have to make these changes in order to set the strings that are going to be used when the application will request permissions. These strings we're gonna add in app.json using the config plugin. Basically, what we have to do is copy this array, as you can see here. Let's copy it. And let's go to our application to the app.json. In app.json, you're gonna find the plugins array. Let's add here and enter. After Expo router, let's put a comma and let's paste the Expo Media Library plugin with these options. So it should look like this. This is an array inside the plugins array. Perfect. Now, what we have to do is to check the usage. How do we use the Expo Media Library? First things first, we're gonna have to request permissions, as you can see here. So let's first import the media library. And we're gonna do that in our, as I said, in our tabs index file. Let's go ahead here and at the top, let's import the media library. Then, using the use permissions hook, we're going to get access to the permissions to know if we already have permissions. If not, we're gonna request them. In the usage guide, they are doing this in the get albums field, basically when the user is requesting the albums. In my case, I want to do this as soon as we load this page, because as soon as we load it, we want to get access to the media. So for that, we're going to use a use effect with an empty dependency array, which means that this function is going to be executed when the home component is mounted. And here what I want to do is I want to check if permissions response is different than granted. Permissions response dot status is different than granted. Then what I want to do is I want to request permissions. And right away we see that experience needs permissions. We see that we need to allow, and now we have permissions here, because if I go ahead and do console log permissions response and look into the logs, we're gonna see that we have access to all photos, and granted equal true, status equal granted, which means that after we give permissions once, then the permissions response is always going to be granted, as long as the user doesn't disable the permissions through the settings. Okay, so now that we have permissions, we should be able to call functions from the media library like getAlbum, which will fetch all the albums from the phone. But instead of getting album, I'm going to get directly the photos, not albums. So I'm gonna look for the method called getAssetsAsync. Media library, getAssetsAsync. This fetches a page of assets matching the provided criteria. And if we don't provide a criteria, we don't provide like any filtering, then it's going to simply give us a list of images from the gallery. So what do we want to do? Maybe in another use effect, let's go ahead and create a function const called get load local assets. This is going to be an async function because we're going to execute some asynchronous code like reading files. And here we're going to use assets page. We're going to call await, and using media library, we're going to call the get assets async. If I do that and then do a console log assets page, let's see what we're going to get here. But when do we want to call load local assets? I can call it in the same use effect, or maybe I can add another use effect that will have the permission response as dependency array, meaning that when the permission response changes, I want to load local assets, but only if permission response.status equal to granted. Only then I want to load local assets. So now, because we are calling this function here, we should see a console log, and if everything is okay, we should see some data. I'm going to parse it, display it with a more friendly way using JSON.stringify. I'm going to provide here this JSON, and by passing here null and then 2, we are going to display it in a format that is easier to read like this. So what we see here, we see an object. The response is an object that has an array of assets, but this is just one page. Usually that should be around 20 images by default, because we are not supposed to load all of them. If you have tens of thousands of photos, it's only going to give us the first page of them. But at the end, it also has some parameters like has next page and an identifier to load the next page, and also the total count to know how many assets approximately are there in the media library. Okay, now that we have these assets, let's go ahead and store them in a state so that we can use them to render these images on the screen. For that, we're going to need a state field called assets, or let's call them local assets. Set local assets. Let me double check if everything is okay. Let me know if everything is okay from the technical side. Question, why not in the first use effect call? We can do that. We could do that, but I wanted to keep it separate, like this is related to requesting permission and this is related to loading assets. But you can easily do that in the same use effect. you just have to add permission response here in the parameters so that we run this use effect again when permission response changes to granted. Anyway, so we have here a state local assets. Let's define it as use state. And initially is going to be an empty array. Let's import use state from React. And we are going to, when loading the local assets, let's store these assets inside our state. So what we have to do here is call set local assets with the field assets page dot assets, because we see we have here the array of assets. It shows us that the types are not compatible because this assets is of type asset, but we didn't specify what the type of our local assets should be. To specify the type, which is actually optional, like nothing is going to break here, is just a typing error, so everything is going to still work. But if you want to properly type your state with TypeScript, we can provide it here between angle brackets, and this is going to be an array of asset that we can import from media library, or media library.asset, and here let's say that it's an array. Now we know that these local assets are of the type asset. And here it doesn't complain anymore. All right, perfect. So we have these assets here. Amazing. What do we need to do? What do we need to do? We need to loop through them, and for every single asset, render an image on the screen, right? When we have to render lists of data, in React Native, we are using a component called flatlist, not from Expo Router, but from React Native. So let's import flatlist here. Flatlist. I'm also going to import a text for debugging purposes and maybe an image, because in a moment we're going to need to render images. Let's go ahead in our return statement where we define what do we want to render on the screen. Let's go ahead and render a flat list here. A flat list requires two properties. Requires at least two properties. One of them is the data, which should be the array of data we want to work with. So our array of data is going to come from the local asset state, which is an array of media library assets. And the second property is called render item. This render item is a function that will be called by the flat list for every single item in this array, and based on that function we need to specify how do we want to render that specific item. So because this is a function, we're going to define it as an arrow function like this. So for every single item there, we can render here a text item. In this case, we're going to see 20 text fields, item, item, item. The thing is that render item is also going to give us the item itself, the data, like one of these objects from the array, so that we can use it, and instead of rendering item, let's render item.uri. Now we see 20 texts that are displaying the URI of the image. It's not very visible because it goes off screen, but anyway, it's there. Okay, now that we have this URI, that means that we can render them using the image component. Let's try to do that. So instead of rendering this text, I'm going to render an image, and I'm gonna do a self-closing tag here because we don't need to provide any children to the image. The image is managed using properties such as source, where we can specify the URI of the image, which we're going to take it from the item.uri. Nothing happens, but that's expected because usually we need to also provide styles. So I'm going to go with a very battle-proof styles like width 200, or 250, height 250. No percentage base, nothing, like simply hard-coded things to make sure that the problem is not with styles. And right away we see an error. Maybe you're not gonna see this error because this error is actually being fixed right at the moment of me recording this video. But this is a problem with the PH format of assets. This is something new and was broken in with a new architecture. And if we look at React Native PH, or let's see, no suitable URL, how is it called? Request handler. Let's do PH. We're gonna see here also in Expo Media Library the bug, but it has been fixed, and it has been fixed by this commit, which was merged on May 12th, and it's already working, but it's not yet in Expo Go. So for you, most probably everything is gonna work. For me, there is still this bug because in Expo Go, we need to wait a bit for Expo Go to receive the latest changes. You can read more about this issue because usually the assets have this assets format on iOS, but recently we have this PH items. Anyway, you can, if everything is working for you, go ahead and continue using the image. However, as a small workaround, but also as a little improvement of our application, I'm going to replace the built-in image component from React Native using Expo image library. If you open it up, this is it's a better image component for React Native because it's designed for speed. It supports a lot of image formats. It supports like blur hashing, transitioning so that you have no more flickering, and a lot of other things that the built-in image component from React Native has issues with. So let's go ahead and all together install Expo image, because it's a drop-in replacement for the built-in image component from React Native. So first I'm going to install Expo image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the image import from React Native, and instead I'm going to do import image from Expo image. Here at the top, as you can see, with destructuring. And right out of the gate, the image component from Expo image works okay with these PH images as well, so that we can see the array of images from our media library. Perfect. If everything is working so far, we are doing great, and yeah, we are just getting started. Okie dokie. Okay. Speaking about this flat list, if we look into the application that we want to build, it's not this one, it's this one. We want to render images in 4 columns. In the flat list, that's easy to do because we simply send the number of columns property to the flat list and we say 4. Usually, we cannot change it on the fly, so by simply pressing R in our terminal, it's going to reload, and now it's working. So now it has this grid of 4 columns, but because we have this width, hard-coded width, it's not working properly. So what we're gonna do to style it? What if we give it 100% here? What's gonna happen? It's going to take 100% of the screen. What if we get to 25%? 25% actually works. It's going to take 25% of the width of our flat list. And instead of providing a height, we can instead do aspect ratio of 1 in order to have them square. So just like that, we have a grid of 4 columns with images there. We can also maybe add here a padding 1. No, padding 1 probably is not the best idea. I want to add some spacings between the rows and the columns. And for that, I'm going to use the property column wrapper style. You can use that on the column wrapper style as gap 1. And this will add gap, maybe even 2, between the columns. And we can also use the content container style, which is the styles applied to the whole container that wraps our content. And basically by adding here a gap, we're gonna add spacings between the rows of our flat list. So this is our usual way of styling, but I said that I also want to show you how to use native wind. And with native wind, we can use properties from with class names from Tailwind. So usually we do that by providing a class name, but in this case, as you can see, we need actually column wrapper styles. So we're gonna send here a content container class name, and by providing here, for example, a gap 2, we're gonna have gap there. Again, these class names are coming from Tailwind, and it supports most of the Tailwind class names like background red 500. This is going to add a background there, and so on. Or padding 5, it's going to add padding. If you are not experienced with Tailwind, go to tailwindcss.com, search here for some properties, for example, margin. Open the documentation and see the class names and their properties. For example, by adding margin 0.5 or maybe even more, like M5, it's going to add some margin, as you can see here. So I'm not gonna overuse it, so if you're not experienced with it, don't worry. As I showed you before, we can style it also with JavaScript, the thing that we are used to. If you are coming from web and have experience with Tailwind, this is going to make a lot of sense and will make it easy for you. I'm going to do the same for the column wrapper styles using column wrapper class name, and I'm going to add here a gap. Instead of 2, let's add it 1, but it's still probably going to be too much. Yeah, it's still too much because gap 1 is actually, if we hover over it, it should be not 1 pixel, but the first size of the gap, which probably is a little bit more. So instead of 1, if we do a square bracket here, we can actually specify the pixel amount. So 1 pixel or even 2 pixels is going to work well here, like this. Perfect. And for this image, it's not gonna work to do it like here, because we will have to transform this image to a component. This is not a component coming from React Native, so we need an extra step to transform it and allow class names on this image. For more documentation, you can look at Native Wind. And here is the documentation for Native Wind. Okie dokie. Andrew is asking, hello, I would like to know if you recommend a database like Supabase or create your own database in Railwhale with Express or Nest.js. For 90% of projects, it's a much smarter choice to go with backend as a service. I've been using Supabase for over a year or even more, and it's a very good service because it's built on top of Postgres. Postgres is a very powerful database. It allows a lot of flexibility. So yeah, I would just go with Supabase in this case. Okay, so we have a list of photos. What do we want to do next? Let me go ahead and create a commit. Git commit, git add, git commit -m, load and display photos from media library. What I want to do next is handle a little bit about of the pagination, because we see that these are not all the photos from my photo library. Like, I have a lot of them here. This in my application is just the first page. So how do we handle loading the next page? Well, if we look at the assets page response when we call get assets async, we're gonna see the next thing. We're gonna see somewhere in this object, besides the assets array, we're gonna see a property has next page and also the end cursor. The end cursor is used to load the next page. So let's go ahead and store these two properties in a state variable, and then when trying to load the next page, use this value and send another request to the media library to give us photos from the next page. So for that, we're gonna need two more state variables. One, to know if we have a next page, so we know that if we need to try to load the next page or not. Has next page, set has next page. This is going to be a boolean, so we're gonna initialize it with true, because initially we believe that there is a page there. And also another state for the, how's it called? The cursor. And cursor. And cursor. Set and cursor. This is going to be undefined initially, but it's going to be of type string. Now, when we have this load local assets, besides setting the assets, let's also set these two things. Set has next page with the response dot has next page, and also set and cursor with assets dot and cursor. Now, knowing whether we have a next page or not, we're gonna do it automatically, but for the beginning, let me just render here a text message saying load next. With a text message, with a button like on a press, it's going to be a bit easier. And I can even give a class name, which you don't have to, because we're gonna remove it in a second, and do text center to center it in the middle, and maybe even padding 2. Okay. But this text we're gonna only render if we have the next page, because if we don't have next page, we don't want to show the button to load next. Now we see it here. When we press on this function, we need to call a function to load the next page. It can be a separate function, but I would rather adjust this function load local assets to support loading next pages. So, what do we need to do here? I'm gonna start by simply calling here load local assets. If I do that and press once again, we see that nothing happens, even though the function was called. That's because we need to look at what are we doing with the response. The thing that we're doing with the response is we are setting it in our state, but we are overriding everything that was already there. Instead of overriding, we always want to append the new assets to that array so that we can build a large array like slowly, like first 20 items, then we add more items and so on. To do that, we can define it as an array in which we are going to destructure or take out from this array all the assets and put them in front of all the items from the existing state local assets. So what we're doing here is, hey, update the local assets using all the items from the newly loaded page and then put the old assets below. So now if I reload, we see a list of items. If I press load next, we see below more items added. Load next, more items added. This is one way of doing it. It's working, but the recommendation of updating a state when we are not overriding, but we are updating, and when we depend on the previous state, is not to depend on the existing values coming from here, but rather provide here a function called an update function, where we are going to receive a very fresh existing items, a very fresh or a very up-to-date version of the existing state, and we can use it as a very reliable source of truth. Because if you know, like, updating a state is asynchronous, and we cannot trust that these local states from there are up to date at the moment of updating them if we run a couple of things in parallel. So instead of using local assets, I'm going to use existing items. And the order we put them here in this array matters, because what do we want to do? We want to, I think we want to put the new page after the existing page. So I'm going to copy this one and put it after existing items. Now, if I reload, I press load next, it still works, it still loads items. But the problem is that we are loading the same page over and over again, as you can see. That's because in this get assets async, we didn't provide any options here. But get assets async, if we look also in the documentation of media library, has this assets option. If we press on it, it's going to show us the options that we can filter, or we can, basically filter. And if we provide this after property, this is used for pagination. So we're going to say, hey, give me all the items, or the next 20 items after the end cursor that we got from the previous page. Basically after the last item from the previous page. If I do that and now reload, why are we loading so many of them? Do you know? Console log loading. I think I'm calling it multiple times. And let me comment out this console log. Clear and reload. Why are we calling 2 times? Probably it's because here, yes, if it's granted, this one is being updated twice. It's granted, and I think it's doing it one more time. Well, one thing that most probably will solve this issue is adding a loading state that will prevent us calling load local assets while we are currently loading them. So while we are awaiting, don't call it once again. Wait for this page to be loaded and only then call it. So for that, we're gonna have a state variable called loading, set loading. Use state, initially is going to be false. And in these load local assets, we're gonna check if we are currently loading, then return, don't try to load it again. If we start loading, we set loading to true, and at the end, we set loading to false. Now let's try to reload, and we see that it loads only once. And if I press load next, we see the next page with different images. If I press again load next, it's going to be the next page, load next, next page. Do I have the same? I think I have the same image multiple times. Yeah, because if it would be duplicated by us, we would have a warning. These are images that I added like multiple times in the library. They are all actually unique, and we can see that in the photos. Yeah, I have like duplicated here. And when we run out of images, we don't show the load next text any longer because has next page became false. So we prevent calling the same function over and over again. And we can even add one more safety net here to stop the execution if it's loading or if it doesn't have next page. So if it doesn't have next page, even if we call it, don't try to load them because you're gonna do a duplicated page, the last page. Okay, so that is basic pagination. But what we can do is using a flat list, we can add automatic pagination by scrolling and loading next page when we get close to the end. This is also called an infinite scrolling pagination. And to do that, the flat list has these properties. It has a callback called onEndReached that is going to be called when the flat list reaches the end. So when the flat list reaches the end, what we want to do is we want to call load local assets, basically load next page. We can also provide here a refreshing property which when set to true while waiting for new data from a refresh. So refreshing, loading, and now if I'm going to refresh and I will start scrolling, we see that automatically a new page is being loaded. And as we get to the end of that list, look at this bar, we're gonna load a new page and we will seamlessly scroll through all of them. Now that we have this automated pagination, we don't need that button anymore because we have proper infinite list pagination. There is also another useful property here called on-end reached threshold, which specifies when do we want to consider that we reached the end. And this is in units of screen height or visible height. So if I put 2 here, it's going to consider that we reached the end when below the visible items we only have 2 screens, with 2 heights of a screen. That's going to allow us to load a couple of pages in front in order for the user not to have to reach the end and see that end. We are basically proactive and loading ahead of time. Look at the bar right now. As I scroll, the bar is still here and it's going to jump because it will load more items. Where is it? Oh, it's already loaded full. But if I do like this, it loads. And yeah, 2 might be too much. We can do 1, which would be like only 1 visible height more. And that's our infinite scroll. Perfect. Let's go ahead and do git add git commit -m pagination for local media. Dhanajay is asking, did you get the 100k silver play button? Yes, we did actually. We did a couple of months ago. I have it in my home office. Now I'm currently back in my home country in Moldova. We spent here the summer because we had the wedding 2 weeks ago. That's why I missed a couple of live streams. We celebrated the wedding, and this is the last stream from Moldova because the next week we are flying back to Barcelona to our new place where I'm going to decorate and arrange a completely new office. So there is a lot of things going on, changing in our lives, which we are super excited. So yeah, thank you. What about web optimization? What exactly do you mean? If you mean for the medias, we're gonna get that there. We're gonna use ImageKit to optimize images for the web. Okay. The next thing that I want to do now is going to be around splitting where we are handling all of this interaction with media library, basically splitting the data from the UI part, from the rendering part. That's because this data, we're gonna need it in multiple places in our application. A bit later, I want to add the details page of the asset. So I want to have a central place where we manage local assets instead of managing it on the screen basis. This is sometimes also called global state management, and we're not going to use anything fancy here. We're going to leverage React context to define the state at the top level and then provide it and use it in multiple components or multiple screens in our application. Let's go ahead and see how we would do that. So here we have our tabs that handle the data, and I want to move these local assets, has next page and so on, all of this state and logic to a context provider. For that, I'm going to start by creating a new folder called providers, and let's call it media provider.tsx. So a context provider starts by creating a context. So media context equal create context like this. Create context comes from React, and it needs to define an object here with the data, with the initial data of our context. Now this media context has two things. It has media context.provider, which helps us expose or provide values, and a consumer that helps us consume this data. So what are we going to do with this provider is we are going to use it here inside a component that we're going to export. So export function media context provider. This function is going to receive a list of children that we can properly type with a helper type props with children imported from React. And when we render the media context provider, we're gonna first render the media context that we created dot provider. We're gonna give here a value, the actual value of our context, and inside the media context.provider, we're gonna render the children property, which will give all the children rendered inside this component access to the value that we will expose here. The last thing, export default. I needed to do export default. The next thing that we need to do is import this component media context provider inside somewhere in our application and render it. And everything that we're going to put inside this one is going to have access to the context. Because this is a global context and we will need it in multiple screens of our application, the best place to use it, the best place to render it is going to be the layout file from our app directory. This is called the root layout, and make sure it's not the layout from the tabs, because that is the tab layout. We need the root layout because the root layout is going to be wrapped around any screen in our application. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this tag inside the media context provider. Let's wrap it here. And everything that we have here, in this case, the stack with the screens, tabs, model, is going to be the children property of media context provider. And the children property, we wrapped them inside this provider so that we will have access to the data that we will expose here. So what data do we need here? For example, it's going to be ABC, ABC. And lastly, what I like to do in a context provider file is export a helper hook export const called, let's say, use media. This is going to be a hook that will call, not create, but use context. Use context from React and providing the media context here. So this use media is basically a shortcut to using this use context media context. From two things that we need to import, we simplified it to only one thing that we need to import with even a better name, like use media. Now we can call this use media inside our tabs index and do const something equal use media imported from our provider's media provider, let's call it. And we're going to have access to, for example, ABC value that we exported there. So if I do console log or maybe console warn to see it on the screen, ABC, we're going to see the warning here, ABC, meaning that from the home, we have access to the ABC value through the use media hook that is coming from our provider, and the value, we define it here. This means that using this context, we extracted some data. We didn't extract it yet, we just set the grounds up for it. But we can expose values, state values, and then use them in any screen in our application. You're gonna see where we will need it, but first let's move from our index tab. Most of the things related to media library. So I'm going to copy, starting from permission response, all the way, even including load, local assets, until the return statement. I'm going to copy everything from here, cut everything from here, and in the media provider, inside my component, let's paste them here. Now slowly we need to re-import the same things, or easier we can go back to index and from the top copy most of the things, back to media provider, paste them here, and only delete things that we don't need. For example, from React, I'm going to move this use effect and use state to the first one, not to have duplicated imports. I will not need the import from React Native here. I don't even need the stack. So basically a lot of things we don't need here. We only needed the media library import, the use effect, and the use state that we are using here. Now, media context provider, when we render it, it will handle the permissions for us. It will handle loading local assets, storing them in a state variable. And what we need to do is basically take these local assets and send it to our media context provider as a value, like this, local assets. Or maybe, yeah, let's do local assets for now. And another thing that we need to also expose is the function load local assets. Local assets, load local assets. And inside index here, in the home screen, we're gonna take these local assets and load local assets function from the use media. Maybe we don't need this refreshing for now. And if we check it here, everything is still working, but now we separated data and access and working with the media library. We separated it into a separate context provider, and then we use this data to render it in a flat list. So it's much more manageable. And also another benefit is that we're gonna have access to the same data from different screens, from different components, because it's global, it's coming from a context. The thing that we need to change here, I will clean up a little bit of these imports. We no longer need the use effect, use state here. We no longer need the media library with text. And the next step is fixing the types, because again, errors related to types are not breaking your code. The code is still working. It's only you're not taking full advantage of TypeScript. So let me show you how we can type our context so we know what type, for example, is this local assets. If I go back to the media provider, to type our context, we're going to define the type here at the top. Type media context type equal. So what's going to be the media context type? We see that we have a field local assets, which in fact I'm going to rename it to assets. What is going to be this type? Well, it's going to be an array of media library assets for now. That's the first one. It will also have load local assets function. So let's say load local assets. The type of this field is a function that doesn't return anything. So a function that returns void. Now having these two, I'm going to take this media context type and I'm going to provide it as a generic type to the create context like this. So create context between angle brackets, we say that this context that we are creating should have these fields. Now, another error is here when we initialize the default values. Our object no longer is not compatible with this type. So we need to provide here initial values for assets. For example, the assets is going to be an empty array initially, and also for the load local assets, which is going to be an empty function, a function with an empty body. So here it's void because we specify what is the return type. Here is the implementation, and we say that this is a function that doesn't do anything. Because when we create a context, here we provide default values. When we render it, here is where we provide actual values. And we have an error because we don't have local assets in our media context. Instead, we have assets which should have a value coming from local assets. So just like that, here we don't have any more red warnings for TypeScript. And in the index, in use media, we see that load local assets. Everything is fine here, but there is a problem with local assets because we renamed it to simply assets. So I'm gonna import it like this, and in the data I'm gonna provide it like this. If I hover over the assets, we see that it's an array of assets. This means that even here in item.uri, we're gonna know exactly what type is this item that we are working with. And if you do an error like URL, you're gonna see that, hey, there is no URL on the asset type. So that's the power of TypeScript. And let's go ahead and add this loading as well, but actually I don't think we need it. So I'm gonna just remove it. So far everything is clean, everything is separated, and we can go ahead and do a git add, git commit. Global state for media files using React context. Nice. Instead of flat list, we can use flash list, right? React Native flat list is super slow in Android when having large list. Yeah, that's true. Flash list is a drop-in replacement for flat list, which is optimized for speed. So yes, we can replace this flat list with a flash list. Leonida, saludos desde México, gracias por el aporte. Gracias por tu... Mi español no es muy bueno, pero yo necesito estudiar porque vivo en España. Sí, that's everything I know in Spanish. Okie dokie. Oh. So what's going to be our next step? If you are just joining our live stream, today we are building a Google Photos clone that is going to be focused on creating an application that will back up your files from local device to the cloud and then allow you to use this application on different devices to view the same files like from multiple devices. This is going to be available both on Android, iOS, and web. And so far we have integrated with a media library to read files and photos from the device. We implemented pagination so we can scroll and load more items. And now what I want to do is when I press on one of these items, I want to open a new page to display that asset individually. So to do that, what we have to do is we need to create a new screen, a new page. Where do we create it? If I'm going to create it inside the tabs, it's going to add it as a new tab. So I need to create it in a different folder. I will go ahead and create it in the app folder directly as a new file called, should I do it photo or asset? Let's do it asset because later we're gonna also have videos as well. So asset.tsx. If we go ahead and simply export default a component here, a function, asset page, and return here, let's say a text asset. This text should be imported from React Native. We're gonna have a new page. On web, it's super simple to navigate there because the name asset of the file is going to become the URL. So by simply going to our URL then /asset, we're gonna navigate there. On mobile, we need to navigate when we click somewhere. For example, when we click on one of these items, I want to navigate to the asset. So let's go ahead, tabs index, and before I do on the item, I will show you step by step like how we get there. So what we can do is above a flat list, I'm gonna render a link component imported from Expo router. Link imported from Expo router. Go to asset page. And if we provide here an href, similar to how an A element works on web, with a string /asset, which also has like this autocomplete, because the name of the file is asset, we will navigate to /asset. We are going to see the go to asset page at the top. If I press on it, we are going to get to an oops page. Why is that happening? Export default. Should I simply reload? And if I press now, yes, now it works. Now we are navigated to the asset page. And we see the text that is being rendered here. So it's that simple. We create files, we export components from there, and Expo router is taking care of it. We then simply use link to link between them. Okay, this was a simple link, but we want to go to this page when we press on one of these images. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap a link component around our image. If I do that with the href /asset, we're going to see that something weird happened to the styles. Well, that's because the styles of the image with width 25 and basically width 25 is no longer the style of a component that render item is rendering, because render item now is rendering a link. However, by providing here as child, we go back to what was working before, because now the link will simply take this image and render it instead of rendering the link. Basically, it's a shadow node. So the styles are working, but if I press on them, nothing happens. Why? Well, that's because when doing as child, we need to make sure that the component that is a child of this link can handle the onPress event, because link will pass down all the properties like onPress to this component. And because the image doesn't have onPress event, when clicking on this, nothing works. So we need to put another component between them called pressable. And pressable is a component, it's a view that has onClick. Again, we lost the styles, so probably I'm going to take this style from here or on the pressable I'm gonna do style, let's do with 25% here, and then with 100% of there. So we make the pressable 25% and we make the image take all the space inside the pressable. Now the styles are back up, and if we press on one of them, we are navigated to the asset page. But how do we know what is the ID, like what is the actual item that we are trying to render? Well, these items, they are going to have an ID. And using that ID, we can pass it there. Like if I look in the console, let's try to see from the context provider. I'm going to uncomment this console log to see the data that we are working with. And we see that there is an ID, which is a unique identifier of that asset, that is of this type. So we're going to use this ID to send it to the details page so that we know like what item to show there. If you have experience with Expo Router, you'd think like, okay, this is going to be a path parameter and we're going to have it a dynamic path parameter here in the name. The problem is that, as you can see in this ID, we have slashes, and slashes will conflict with how URLs are working, because a slash in a URL will be handled as a different segment. So instead of that, what we are going to use is we are going to use, similar to how we are using on the web, search options using the question mark, and then here saying ID equal, and we provided dynamic property here. For that, we need to transform it to a template string with backticks. Here we're going to provide the item.id. So we are still navigating to the assets, but we are sending some data, and specifically the ID of the item. It still works, but now if we go on the asset page, we can get access to that ID by calling use local search parameters. And this is going to be an object with all of these parameters, and one of them is going to be ID. If I do asset ID between curly brackets to use it as a variable, if I press here, we see the ID. If I press here, we see another ID, A4, it ends with E5, 83, and so on. So now we are sending a parameter from here to the details page so that we can use it later to know like what item to display. But how do we know what item to display? Well, we can load them again from media library by using the ID, which probably is not a very bad idea, or because we know that it's most probably already in our context provider in our local assets, we can loop through them and find that asset with that ID. So let's go ahead and create here a function const inside our media provider, a function called get asset by ID. And what we're going to do is we're going to receive the ID as string here, and we're going to return the local assets dot find the asset that has the ID equal to the ID that we are looking for. And basically this is going to return either a media library asset or undefined if we didn't find anything. Let's go ahead and export it from here, but we need to make sure that for the value we export it, we need to make sure that we also specify it in the type. So let's specify getAssetById function here, it's a function that needs the ID type, ID parameter, and it will return, as we saw there, if I hover, it will return a media library asset or undefined. So I can properly type it here like this. Now, in the default value for the getAssetById, we're going to have a function that will return undefined. So this is a non-implemented version of this function. Okay, now that we have this function, let's go in our application asset.tsx, and having this ID, let's go ahead and do using the use media hook, we're gonna get access to the function getAssetById, and using this function, we're gonna find the asset that we're interested in, getAssetById, and we're gonna send there the ID coming from use local search parameters. Now, if I do console log asset, let's see what's happening when we click on one of these items. Okay, it re-renders a couple of times. We can think about that like later, but at least it gives us information about the asset that we are looking for. So let's go ahead and think what we're gonna do with them, like what to render. Well, if there is no asset, let's return a text saying asset not found. But if there is an asset, we are going to return the following. Let's first return a fragment, because we also want to adjust, a bit later we're gonna adjust the header, but for now let's render the image, import it from Expo image, where the source is going to be asset.uri. And for the style, I'm going to go with 100%, height 100%, and if I go to one of these items, okay, we see it, but most probably I want the resize mode. It shouldn't be resize mode, it should be content fit. I want to make sure that we see the full image, so the content fit is not going to be cover, but contain. So if I do contain, the component is going to make sure that we see the whole image, even though it doesn't cover the whole screen, but that's what we want in this situation. And just like that, we have a nice page that we can view these images in. And lastly on this page is to fix this ID, because use local search parameters thinks that ID can be either a string or an array of strings. Well, it's not going to be an array of strings, so we can tell this hook that, hey, the ID is simply going to be a string. And now it knows that ID is a string, and here it doesn't complain anymore. Perfect. So that is our details page. And what I wanted to do besides rendering the image is I wanted to adjust the header. Because you see at the top we see asset. By rendering on a screen a stack.screen component, the stack imported from Expo router, and by sending here options, we can adjust the configuration of our stack screen, such as title, we can say photo. Just like that, we see the photo title there. And we can also render some icons on the left. One of the icons that I want is going to come from Expo vector icons, and it's going to be something like upload. This one is okay. We are going to import it from ndesign at the top, and we're going to render this icon in the stack screen options as the header right component. So header right is going to be a function that will render the icon and design. And just like that, we have the icon there at the right, which later, when we press, is going to call the uploading or synchronization with the cloud. Perfect. Oh, thank you very much. Can we use Supabase for a big e-commerce application? Absolutely. It scales very well. So we have a lot of things already covered here. Our front end is more or less ready, unless we want to cover some styling, but maybe I'm gonna leave that for the end, because on the backend we still have a lot of things to cover, like synchronizing authentication, optimization, videos, and so on. So I'm not gonna cover like styles in terms of dark mode and so on, even though I really want to, but maybe we can have some time at the end. So let me do a git add, git commit -m, asset details page, and this is going to be the asset detail page that we see here. Perfect. Give me just 1 second. I'm gonna have a toilet break, and we are going to continue the tutorial with the backend integration. The next step is going to be to integrate with Supabase to add authentication so users can create accounts and later upload the images, backup, synchronizing cloud, and so on. So stay tuned. I'm going to be back and we are continuing this tutorial. All right, I'm back with my second coffee. I hope you got some a little break as well. Question, can you make a tutorial of a monorepo with React Native and Next.js with a single backend for both? That's a good idea. I'm gonna add it to my idea list and maybe we can do it. So let me double check with my plan. We did the initialization, the media library, the flat list, details page. Now we are getting into the backend. Nice. So, because this application needs to work with multiple users, we need a way to authenticate users, to allow them to create an account, to manage, to sign in, and so on, so that when they back up their photos, we will link the images to their account and we will protect the images so that only they have access to it. This is super important, and for that we are going to use Supabase. Supabase is a backend as a service solution, is open source Firebase alternative, and it's built on top of Postgres databases, which is something that I really love about it. So let's go ahead, create an account, go to the dashboard, and create a new project. I'm gonna choose my organization. Let's give a project a name, Google Photos. Let's give our database password. I'm gonna copy it. Probably I have to save it somewhere. Let me see where I can save it. So, but even if you don't save it later, we can reset it. Choose a region where you want your servers to be. I'm gonna leave the one closest to me. And let's press create a new project. While the project is setting up, I'm going to search Supabase React Native, and there is this build a user management application with Expo React Native. This is an example of integrating Supabase in React Native. So let's go ahead and follow it. I'm not going to follow it really step by step. I'm going to show you some changes as well, but it's a good starting point to make sure that we are up to date and following the best practices from Supabase. So first we need to create a new project. After that, we will have to set up the database schema. Let's check if the project is ready. Well, it's still building, so I'm gonna skip a bit. I'm gonna come back here a bit later. And I'm going to go right to the documentation related to React Native to see what libraries do we need to install. So here, we already have a project, so I'm not gonna create a new one. I will go right here to see what packages we need to install. And I'm going to install Supabase JS, the React Native Async storage, which probably will already have it installed. And I don't need this React Native UI themed because this is a component library that we don't need. Like for a couple of buttons and inputs, we can style them ourselves and we don't need to bring anything extra. So let's copy only these two things into our project, open the terminal, do a clear, and run this install command. So npx expo install Supabase JS and the async storage. Let's press enter. And we are up to date. Perfect. I'm gonna check back if our project is installed. Yes, it's set up on Supabase. Welcome to your new project. Now we out of the gate have our database, our Postgres, where we can create tables. What I want to do is I'll go into the SQL editor, and here in the quick starts, there is a quick start called user management starter. If I open it up, this is exactly the one from this documentation. If I scroll back up, in the setup, the database schema, we are going to use this user management starter from the dashboard under SQL editor, and we do this one. Where is it? Here. So what it does, it creates a table where we will hold information about user profiles, and it links those profiles with the authenticated users. It also creates some policies to allow only owners of a profiles to update their information. It automatically inserts new items when we create an account. You don't have to understand all of this. I'm just quickly explaining what's happening here. And it also sets up the storage. It creates a bucket for avatars. In fact, now that I'm thinking, we don't even need anything from here, you know? So I'm thinking maybe we need to skip it altogether, because our application is not going to include features such as creating the full name, username, and so on, avatar. It's going to be, the focus is completely on something else. So I think we're not gonna do this. Yeah, ignore this part. We're not going to follow the user management starter. We are going to go right away and implement authentication, because for authentication, we don't have to set up anything. Just by creating the Supabase project, we already have authentication enabled out of the gate, and I'm gonna show you in a second how to implement it. What we need to do is we actually need to get the API keys. So let's go to our project. Let's go to our project settings. Under API, here, the first key is going to be this URL. Let's copy this URL. Let's go back in our project. And this project comes with a .env file, and it already has this Expo public Supabase URL. Let's paste our Supabase URL here. And the next one is the anon key, the anonymous key, or also called the public key. The public key is in the next session under the API keys. Under the public, I'm gonna copy it, come back, and put it in the environment variables. If you didn't start with the same starter, with the same create expo stack, go ahead and create this .env file with this configuration, and next, under utils Supabase TS, go ahead and initialize the client. And this code is also available in the Getting Started guide. If we scroll down a bit, under Supabase TS, it shows how to take the URL from environment variables and then creating the Supabase client. Now that we have this Supabase client, we can easily go ahead, import it in our files, and interact with our Supabase backend. So I'm gonna close it because we are not gonna touch it a lot, that utils files. It's just for configuring Supabase client. Let's go back. And the next step is going to be to setting up a login component. What I'm going to do for the login component is I'm going to create a separate screen. Not only a separate screen, but actually a separate folder under our application called auth. And inside auth, I'm going to create the index.ts. Not index, let's create login.tsx. Now from here, let's do export default. Let me double check if everything is fine, if I didn't forget to share the screen and so on. And here, from the login screen, let's export default function login screen. And we're going to, we're going to return the login form. We can take inspiration from this documentation, from the login component. And in fact, let's copy the whole file from here and adjust it instead of writing it ourselves and replace with what we have. Let's save and let's adjust some of the things here. We are gonna first adjust them and then I'm going to explain them, because by adjusting I'm also going to clean up some stuff and later it's going to be much easier to understand what this file is doing. So first of all, the Supabase client is going to be imported from utils. So instead of lib, I'm going to do this caret and then utils. Yes. Now we imported the Supabase client. The button and input, we do not have them because we didn't install this library. So instead of from importing them from here, I'm going to import the button from React Native, and the text input from React Native as well. Let's scroll down a little bit. And we're going to see that there is no input because we have to rename it to text input. And the text input does not have a label, so I'm going to remove a label, and it does not have a left icon. I'm going to remove it. It's going to be simpler. Save. Same thing for the password. Instead of input, it's going to be a text input without a label and without a left icon. And the button remains the same and everything is fine. Before adjusting a little bit the styles and so on, let's think about one. Yeah, let's quickly see what's happening here. Well, here in the event listener, we are listening to when the application comes into the foreground, we're gonna see and start auto-refreshing the authentication to see like if the user has already a token. In this off screen, we have two inputs, the email input and the password input. And two buttons, the sign in and the sign up. The sign in button calls the sign in with email, which is defined here. And sign in with email simply calls Supabase off, sign in with password and provide the email and password state. Same thing happens with the sign up. We call the sign up with email and password and that's it. It's not that complicated. So these two functions are responsible for creating an account and this one is for signing in. To get to that page, we are going to scroll down until we see the launch. Here in the app.tsx, they show how to keep track of the session to know if the user is already signed in or not. This is important because we are going to use this session information to know if we have to automatically redirect the user to the authentication screen or if we'll have to redirect them to the tab screen. This information we're going to keep inside another provider called authProvider. So let's create authProvider.tsx. And here we're going to start again by creating the auth context using create context from React. It's going to be like this. Then we're going to export default function of context provider. So this is again a context provider with the same strategy that we used for the media. The goal of it is to share a global state about authentication so that from any screen we can easily know information about the user, information if he's authenticated or not. So to do that in the of context provider, we're going to take this of context dot provider. Inside it, we're going to render with children. And here we're going to set the value with information about user and session, which we're going to get in a second. These children should be typed with props with children. And to have access to this of context, I usually export a custom hook use of. That is a shortcut to use context of context. Now we need to render somewhere in our application the of context provider, and we're going to do it as well again in the root layout as we did with the media context provider. But we're going to do it before it, so even above it. Of context provider is going to come first, then the media context provider, and then the stacks. This of context provider was automatically imported from here. I'm going to change a little bit the order so they are close together. Okay. Now, in the of provider, we can go back to the documentation and see how we can manage the session. So we're going to need the state for the session, and inside the use effect we are fetching it, and also we are subscribing to state changes. Let's copy these two things, the state and the use effect, inside our of context provider. Let's import useState from React. Let's import session from Supabase.js, use effect from React, Supabase from our utils Supabase, where we created our client. And that's it. Now we have a session. We can take this session and export it, oh, not like this, but we export it from the context provider. And that session also has information about the user. So what I can do is, besides exporting the session, let's also export user, which we're going to take from session.user. And we see that this session can also be null, so that's why we have a question mark. As to improve this a little bit further, I'm going to create a type for our of context type. And it's going to contain the session. And the session can be either session or null. And user, which can be a user imported from Supabase.js, or it can be null or undefined. Undefined. Now we take this type and we provide it here, and we need to make sure to initialize session with null for the default values. And also user with undefined. Okay, so our session provider is ready, which means that now Supabase URL is required. Supabase URL is required. This is an issue coming from create client. That's because we updated our environment variables, and when we update environment variables, we need to restart our server. So I'm going to stop it here by pressing Control C or Control C, and I'm going to do npm start again, so that the new environment variables will be used. Hello Matt, how are you doing? Now let's do a reload. And we don't have that error anymore, because most probably Supabase client used properly information about the connection string. Now, because we have this auth provider that are giving us access to the session and the user, we can use it inside our tabs layout, and the layout file is the shared component between all the screens in a folder. So because layout inside tabs is responsible for all the screens here inside the tabs. That means what I want to do is, if the user is not authenticated and somehow he gets on the tabs layout on any of these tabs, I want to redirect him to the authentication screen. So in the tabs layout, I'm going to get access to the user const user using the use of hook that we exported from our auth provider. Let's go ahead and do a console log user. And from the media provider, I'm going to comment out the console log that has a lot of data there. So we see that the user is undefined. That means that we are not yet logged in. That means that we should not be able to see the photos page. Actually, it depends on different use cases, because sometimes you want to protect pages. Sometimes, as in this situation, I might be able to show them the photo library, but I might disable the syncing up or backing up. For simplicity reasons, what I'm going to do in this tab layout, I'm going to say if user is undefined, don't render the tabs, instead render a component called redirect that is going to redirect the user to the href that we provide here. And the href is going to be auth login. If I do that, we get to the auth login, because first we try to go on the tabs, but the tabs layout check that the user is not authenticated. If it's not authenticated, it redirected him to the login. So this is how we create protected pages and protected layouts, protected groups of pages. Now, back on our login screen here, let me go ahead and adjust a little bit like everything that is happening here. I'm going to simplify some stuff. I'm going to remove these views that have this vertical space, because I'm going to handle it with Tailwind much better. Let's remove this view and the closing one. Let's remove this vertical space view and this closing one, so that we simply have text inputs, much easier to see. Similar here, 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 and here. So now I don't even need these styles. Now we have two text inputs and two buttons. Very simple to see. And to manage that properly, like the styling, I'm going to use class names from Tailwind. So on the whole container, I'm going to add a padding 5 to have some spacing around. Maybe even a margin top 10 to move them a little bit from the top. Now on the text input, let's add here a class name as well. I'm going to add a border. This will add an actual border. I'm going to say that border color should be a gray, and using denominators like 300, 400, we specify how light the gray should be. So 300 should be okay. Now using P3, we're going to add some padding in that component, and simply using rounded, small or simply rounded, we're going to round the corners. It changes the order because of something, but with rounded MD, the corners are even more round. I'm happy with how this one looks there. And I can take this class name and put it to the password as well. Perfect. And on the top view, I'm going to add a gap 5, and this will add some spacing between the items. Maybe gap 3. Oh, not padding, but on the gap, I will remove it to 3. Perfect. That's what I wanted. And now I can go ahead and write an email. But before that, you know what I want to do? Let's go ahead back to our dashboard and change under the authentication providers email. Let's disable confirm email, because by default users should confirm their email by pressing on a link that they receive on the email. In our case, we don't need that, so I'm gonna disable confirm email and I'm gonna press save. This way, after signing up, I can already start using the application. Back on my screen, I can go ahead and do vadim at notjust.dev and an easy password. If I press sign in, we're gonna see invalid login credentials because I don't have yet an account. If I press sign up, we don't see any errors and we are supposed to be logged in. We are not redirected automatically, but if I press R to reload the application, we're still not there. But one extra step that we have to do is on the login screen, let's do the same thing as we did here with protecting the layout. What we want to do is, if the user is already logged in, but he is on the login screen, I want to redirect him away. So I'm gonna copy these 2 lines, or 5 maybe, in the login screen. At the top here, I'm going to import use of from auth provider and the redirect from expert router, but I'm gonna change here the condition. If user is defined, I'm gonna redirect him to tabs simply /tabs. Now, if I reload and somehow I get there, I'm redirected to the tabs. And at this level, we did it on the screen level. We can do it also on the layout by simply creating a layout file. But because we only have one screen, I think it's okay to do it on the screen level as well. If you'd have like multiple screens, like login, sign up, forget password, and so on, in that case, you might want to put it on the layout layer, similar to how we did on the tabs. For the logout, maybe we can do it in the model. So let me go into the model, and instead of screen content that I will actually remove, I will add here a button from React Native with the title sign out. Do we see it? Yes. And on press, I will do Supabase .off.sign out, and that's it. That's how simple it is. So if I press now sign out, we'll see that we are redirected to the off/login screen. So now we properly protect our pages. Oh, I need another email, and I can sign back in like this. Sign in, and we are redirected here. You might think that there is a small bug if in the model I press sign out, I'm not automatically redirected. That's because the model is outside the tabs. So we only protected the tabs here. like with some adjustments, like we can move the model inside the tabs, but there we would need to create like a couple of folders, additional folders. So I'm gonna just mention you that yes, this is how it works. Like probably it's not perfect, but it's not like a very high priority for now. Ugh, such a bad coffee. Oh. Okay, so our authentication is done. Now, if we go to our table editor, or maybe in the authentication, right away, you're gonna see that we have one user that was created 23rd August. If I go into the table editor, another thing that I like about Supabase is that everything lives on the database layer. Even authentication, we can go here by changing the schema from public to auth. We're gonna see a table called users with information about the user, about the email, password hash, and so on. So this way we can create database relationships with these users, and a lot of things are much more transparent to us as developers. I'm gonna go back to the public schema. This public is where we will keep our custom tables, because we are not supposed to change anything other than public, such as auth or storage. Okay, now authentication is done. Let's go ahead and do a git status, git add, git commit, Supabase setup and authentication. Oh, perfect. So what's going to be our next step? What's going to be our next step? I think our next step is already going to be to start uploading, how do you pronounce it? Uploading photos to Supabase storage. Supabase has this storage, which is compatible with S3. I'm going to talk a little bit about that a bit later when we will integrate with ImageKit. And this allows us to use ImageKit together with Supabase. But the first step is to upload files. Again, there are multiple options that you can do. You can directly upload them to ImageKit. So if you go to the React Native, you will see documentation on how you can do client-side file uploading directly to ImageKit. This is going to be even easier for you for the image processing because your images will be on ImageKit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can use ImageKit with in front of external storages, because if you already have a project where you have files somewhere on S3, on Azure, on Google Cloud, on your web server, it's super easy to put in front of your buckets, in front of your storages, the ImageKit server that is going to handle the media processing, the streaming, the transformation for you, so that you can start integrating ImageKit in your application. So for that reason, our first step is going to be to upload files to the storage, to Supabase storage, and then integrating ImageKit in front of that for the optimization. So let's go ahead and first go to our Supabase project, storage, create a new bucket called assets. It shouldn't be a public bucket. Let's simply create this, save. Under policies, we need to specify who should be allowed to upload pictures, information, data, and so on. So by default, no one is going to be allowed to upload data here, neither to read it. By creating a policy under policies, assets, let's go ahead and do new policy. Let's check the get started quickly if we find something that we are interested in. Give users access to only their own top level folder name as UID. I think that's exactly what we want. For example, a user with this ID will be able to access anything under the folder with this name. So that's what we're gonna do. Every user will have their own folders. And with this policy, we say that, hey, you have access to the storage folder name that starts with your ID. And this is going to be evaluated every time a user tries to upload, download, view, and so on. So let's go with this template. Give user access to own folder. Let's select what operations we want to allow. I want to allow selecting, I want to allow inserting, updating, and even deleting. Basically, the user will have full access to only his own folder because this is the policy definition. Target roles, maybe we can specify that only authenticated users, but based on this policy, it's already obvious because it will work with Authentication UID. After we do that, don't change anything here, leave it as it is. Let's do review and let's do save policy. Now we should have 4 policies for select, insert, update, and delete. And yeah, that's now users will have access to their folders. Okie dokie. Let's go ahead and see Supabase storage JS JavaScript. So this is what do we need to do to upload a file. To upload a file to Supabase, we will call supabase.storage. We're gonna specify the bucket name, in this case avatars, in our case assets, and then we're gonna say upload. This is the name of a file, this is the actual file, and then we can specify some options. The thing is that, as you can see here, for React Native, we cannot use blob file or form data. It doesn't work as intended. So instead, we need to use an array buffer. If we switch here to upload file using array buffer, here we see how it's happening. It uses this decode to decode the base64 file data. Well, we're gonna do a couple of steps to get it right, but I'm gonna try to make it as easy as possible to understand you how it's working. And don't expect to remember everything, because most of the times, like, you're gonna have to come back and look at these steps, because I don't think anyone remembers like all of this reading, parsing, decoding, encoding, base64, buffer, and so on. Like, I want to make sure that you understand that even I had a lot of preparation time, like a lot of working to make it work. But now I'm gonna share you the result. That's a nice comment. Ashish is saying, I've been using ImageKit since 2019. It's awesome. Perfect. I can't wait to integrate it with the project. So first we need to upload images, then we are integrating ImageKit to optimize them. Okay. Okay. So let's start by creating a function in the media provider that is going to be responsible for syncing an asset to cloud or uploading it to the storage. Let's start by doing sync to cloud. It's a function that will receive an asset of type asset. And what it's going to do is upload to Supabase storage this asset, or it should be media library.asset. Let's do a console warn syncing to see if we are calling this function. Let's go ahead and export this function from our context provider. Also, we need to make sure to put it in the types, in the type at the top with the proper parameters, media library.asset, and it will return probably void for now. It will not return anything. We need to provide the default function here. Come on, like this. Now we need this function on this page when we press on this icon. So let's go to our application, asset. From the use media, let's import the function sync to cloud. And let's call sync to cloud when we press on the icon. So the icon has a on press event. We're gonna call sync to cloud, and we're gonna send there the asset that we want to sync. Now, if I press on this one, we see syncing from the media provider that we are logging here. We can even do here the asset that we are trying to sync. So if we look in the logs and press it, we see syncing and the data about this asset. So it has a file name, it has the ID, and it has a URI. But this URI is not a URI to a file. This is URI to the photo gallery, like to a photo. I'm going to use another function from the media library to get more information about that file. So in the sync to cloud, let's do const info equal. Is it a await media library dot get asset info, and by providing here either the ID or the actual asset, we're gonna fetch more information about that asset. So let's do console log JSON stringify info with null and 2 to see it properly formatted. This async, probably we need to also adjust it in the type. Sync to cloud is going to be an async function. No? It will return a promise. Maybe a promise. Void. Something like that. Undefined? Will it work? No. Well, I will leave void here for a second. Back to my sync to cloud here. Let's see what is the information that we got by calling an extra media library function get asset info async. If we check now when pressing on this button, we see that we have here more information. This is the object we're looking at, but what I'm interested in is in this local URI, because the local URI is a URI to the actual file. Now that we have a file URI, we're going to be able to read that file, to read the content of that file, and later upload it to storage. So what I'm interested in is in the info.local URI. If I go here and do this, I'm gonna see the file URI. Perfect. Now, in the next step, we need to read this file. We need to read the content of this file as a base64 string. For that, we're gonna use another library called Expo File System. The file system library allows us to interact and read local files. Let's go ahead and install Expo File System in our application. And in the usage, I don't need to download. I need a function, if I will zoom out, called read. Let me find it. Read as string. The file system read as string will read the contents of a file as a string. This is the binary will be returned in a raw format, and this is the base64 data for that file. It needs a file URI, and that starts with file. And because we saw that, yeah, we have access to this file URI, we can go ahead and call const base64 string is equal to await. I'm going to go ahead at the top and do the same, import everything as file system from Expo file system. And let's go ahead and call here await file system dot read string async for the file URI that we saw here, info local URI, string or undefined. Well, if it's undefined, if info dot local URI is undefined, let's stop here because something wrong with that file. Now let's go ahead and do a console log base64 string. If I look in the logs and press on this button, after a bit of time, we are supposed to see something, but we don't. ¿Por qué? Base64 string. Let's reload. If I open, do that. Possible unhandled promised rejection. Error calling function has failed. Is not readable. File is not readable. Should I also add here encoding? I need to add encoding base64, but I'm not sure if that's the problem. Let's try again. If I do that, yes. So what I needed to do is I needed to add encoding base64 to specify I want to read the file as a base64 string. And here is the content of that file encoded in base64. Cool. So we got to a step where we have a base64 string. Now from Supabase documentation, we see that the next step is to use the decode function from base64 array buffer which is another library that we need to install. Base64 array buffer. Let's go ahead and copy the name of it and install it in our project. Npm install. And we can do const base or array buffer equal to decode imported from this newly created library based on the base64 string. So now this is an array buffer of type array buffer that we can upload to Supabase. This decode function was imported from base64 array buffer. Now, having this array buffer, the last step is going to be to call Supabase upload. Let's copy this one from here. Let's add it here in the sync to cloud. Let's make sure to import Supabase from our utils where we initialize the client. Let's change the avatars to assets or to the name of the bucket that you created here under storage buckets. In my case, that's assets. For the name, here it's where it's important. Like if I'm gonna try to do it right now, we're gonna get a permission denied error. Let's see that by doing a console log data then error. If I try to do that right now, we see unauthorized, because what we are trying to do is we are trying to upload to a folder called public, which we do not have access to. Remember, the policies that we created here said that we only have access to the folder that contains our ID. That means that when trying to upload, we need to specify the folder with our ID. So I'm going to go ahead and get the ID of our user from the use of context. I'm going to take the user, and instead of this public, first I'm going to change this to backticks to a template string, and instead of public I'm going to put here the user.id. I'm going to remove this one from here, and I'm going to somewhere at the top I'm going to say stop here if there is no local URI or if there is no user. We shouldn't get here without a user, but anyway, let's try it. Let's put it here as a safety net. Now, if I try this one, it says syncing, and it says full path, ID, and so on. What does that mean? That means that we successfully uploaded a file to our assets folder. It automatically created a bucket with the ID from our user, and you can compare it with the ID here, user ID, storage, assets, and if I do search, it's this. And we have avatar 1, which it's only 10 bytes. I think something went wrong. If it's only 10 bytes, that means that something was not uploaded correctly. What did we try to upload here? Well, I see. We uploaded something wrong here, because we need to upload the array buffer that we already decoded. If I go here and try to upload it again, I'm gonna get an error saying that duplicate, the resource with name avatar already exists. However, if I'm gonna say, I can manually remove it, but if I will say upsert true, that means that when trying to upload to the same URL, we're gonna replace it. And that's a good thing, because if we modify the image and try to sync it again, I want to replace the old one with a new one. So with upsert, when I press again, it's not going to try to upload, it's going to try to update it if it's already there. Now, if I go here to the avatar and do a reload avatar, now it's 2.3 megabytes, which gives me an impression that it was loaded correctly. If I press download and open it up, we see the image that was loaded. So even if you don't see it here, because it might be a different format, like iOS specific format, by simply downloading it, you should be able to open and see the actual content of that photo. If that's the case, that means that you have correctly uploaded the image to your storage. But instead of hardcoding avatar1.png, what I want to do is I want to keep the same name as our asset has here. So instead of avatar, I'm going to replace it with asset dot file name. Do we have it? File name. So now if I upload once again and go back here to reload, we're gonna see the EMG 003 JPG, which is also with a proper how's it called? Extension. And instead of hardcoding content type PNG, what will happen if I don't provide it at all? If I upload it again, let me see. It's a plain text. No, I need to specify the content type. But I don't want to hard code it. I want to somehow properly specify, because this one is not a PNG. This one should be another MIME type. So what I'm gonna use another library from npm MIME. This is a library that has a database of file extensions with their MIME types. For example, let's go ahead and install it. Install MIME, and we can guess the MIME type using this MIME. What happened here? Now let's simply do MIME. We're gonna do MIME.get type from the path, from the asset dot either file name or path. It needs something that has the extension. And if it couldn't find it, let's do fallback to image/JPEG. Now if I'm gonna try to upload it again, go back to my database and reload, it's going to be image.jpg because this is JPEG. If I'm gonna try another one, which I believe should be, which one? I don't know, maybe this one? Let's try. This is also JPEG. I'm trying to find something from the phone. Maybe this one is going to be a web or a hake. And it has a proper MIME type here as well. Whew, perfect. So far, so good. We can upload images. This was probably one of the hardest part because we have a lot of steps. Like I'm gonna remove some of these console logs to clear things up. But yeah, like it involved a lot of things. First of all, we needed to know the file URI. For that, we use another media library function called getAssetInfoAsync, which gives us more information about the file, and it also includes the local URI. Then, using file system, we read that file into with a base64 encoding. From base64 encoded, we transform it into array buffer, and that array buffer we uploaded to Supabase storage into our bucket, and using the MIME we found the proper MIME type of that file, and that's how everything works. Now that you see, like, it looks not that complicated, probably nobody's gonna remember all of these steps, but you always know that you can come back, watch this video, or check the source code that you're gonna find in the description below when you have to handle these kind of scenarios. I'm gonna go ahead and do git status, git add, git commit. This is going to be upload files to Supabase. How are you doing, guys? How is it going so far? Hello, Aditya, how are you? How are we on time? 2.5 hours in. Okay, that's good. What we will do next, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Buff. Yeah. So we still have to manage like keeping track of what files we already synchronized, like what file needs a backup or not. And also we need to display the files from our storage. For that, we're gonna use ImageKit, and we're gonna implement it so that even if you don't have that image on your phone, on your device, if you already deleted it, you still want to see it. So I was not sharing my screen, but that is going to be our next step. Before we do that, give me just 1 second. I'm gonna bring some more water and we can continue. Also, take a water break. Don't forget to stay hydrated and come back with new powers, because we still have a lot of things to implement in the application to make it really top-notch, production ready. So I'm gonna be back in 1 minute and we continue. Okay, I'm back. and ready for the next steps. The next step is, now that we have uploaded our files to storage, I would like to, instead of rendering them from local, if they are already backed up, I would like to load them from remote, from our cloud storage. The way we are going to do that is going to be using ImageKit. In the documentation, we see that ImageKit can connect with external storages such as Amazon S3 and other providers. What makes this really work smoothly is that we're not going to connect it directly with Amazon S3, but with an S3 compatible storage. And because Supabase storage is compatible with S3 protocol, this happened a couple of months ago, we can easily connect ImageKit to Supabase storage through the S3 compatible storage. For that, what we have to do is to go ahead and sign up. You can use the link in the description, or we can go ahead and sign in with a new account. Let's give it a name. In my case, it's going to be notjust. And for the region, when we connect it with when we put it in front of a storage, we need to put it in a region closest to our region. So if I go to project settings, infrastructure, we see that in our case, we are in Central EU. So in ImageKit, we're going to select Europe, Frankfurt, the same region as we have our storage. This way, the files will travel much faster between our ImageKit and Supabase. Let's put next. And here we have it. From the documentation, we see that what we have to do is we need to go to external storages and click Add New. Let's go to external storage under configuration and press Add New. Here we need to give it a name. Let's give it Supabase. The origin type is going to be an S3 compatible storage. The bucket name is going to be here from the buckets, our bucket name. In my case, that's assets. The bucket folder, if we have a specific folder, yes, but in our case, we need the root folder. So I'm going to do /. Access key and secret key is the way how we will give access to ImageKit to our bucket. For that, we need to go under storage, settings, and here there is the S3 connection. What we have to do is we have to, under S3 access keys, we need to create a new access key. Let's call it ImageKit and create an access key. Now we see the ID. Let's copy it and put it here in access key. And the second one is secret access key. Make sure to keep it secret because this gives access to your files. And let's put it under secret key here. And lastly, we need the endpoint. And the endpoint is going to be here under endpoint. S3 connection, endpoint, let's copy it and give it to ImageKit. Lastly, we need to do force path style URL generation. Make sure to enable this one and then press save. We see that our origin has been added successfully. And if we look under the URL endpoints, this is our URL on that will help us load images from ImageKit. And under origins, we see that it will allow us to access images from the media library from ImageKit if we upload them directly here, and also from the Supabase assets storage. Now, the only thing that's left is to try to load an image. To do that, we're going to copy this identifier from URL endpoints, and let's put it here in browser. Then we're gonna go to the storage. Under assets, let's take, for example, this image, and we need to get the path. Where is the path? Well, the path is going to be this ID. So I copy the ID, I paste the ID here. I didn't copy the ID. Let's select, copy the ID. This is the folder that we want to load. And then the name of the file is going to be EMG. Let's paste it and let's do enter. Voila, we have a photo loaded from the CDN from ImageKit. This is the original photo, but now using some URL parameters, we can apply transformations, resizing, cropping, and a lot of optimization techniques that we can find in the documentation under transform and adapt. For example, we can add here transformations such as width 300, height 300, and the structure is first is the endpoint, then the transformation, then the asset path. So if I copy this transformation part and put it after not just as a slash then this one, we're gonna see automatically a resized image. Same things here. If I look at our, this is a resize. Let's check our image transformations. Resize and crop. We can add overlays. We can do AI transformations. We can do effects with contrast, sharpening. We can do radius, shadows, blur, gradients. Look, we can take this gradient, this TR, if I can copy it properly. Like this. I can go ahead and apply it in my URL here, and now we have a gradient on top of the image, just using URLs. That's super powerful, and it opens up a lot of possibilities for us to add image transformations and optimizations in real time for our images. Now that we have the possibility to load files that we have in Supabase through ImageKit, we can go ahead into the quick start guides under React Native and see how we can do that in React Native. So what we have to do is first install a bit down, where is the npm install ImageKit JavaScript. So let's copy this one in our application and let's install it here. Clear, install ImageKit JavaScript. Let's go back. And it says that we need the React Native URL polyfill, but Expo automatically adds this polyfill, so we don't have to do this extra step. Now we need to initialize the SDK. So for that, we're going to create in the lib or in the utils a file called ImageKit. And the code is going to be from this uplib ImageKit. So let's copy this code. And let's go ahead and create in the utils a similar file how we have Supabase initialization. We're going to have ImageKit.ts. Let's paste here the code. What it does, it imports ImageKit from ImageKit JavaScript. It needs the URL endpoint, public key, and authentication endpoint. We don't need authentication endpoint because that is only used when we are uploading directly to ImageKit. However, we need the URL endpoint and public key. We're not going to do that through configuration. However, we're going to do that through environment variables. So const URL is going to be equal to process.env.expo_public because it needs to be public, the endpoint. Let's call it ImageKit URL. And then the public key is going to be process.env.expo_public_ImageKit key. Now, instead of these things, I'm going to remove them, and simply when initializing ImageKit, I'm going to do them here directly. I'll provide here an object with URL endpoint, which is going to come from the environments, and with public key, which is also going to come from environments. Now we need to make sure that we add these keys in our .env file. Like this, first one and the second one. And we need to go ahead from ImageKit dashboard, from the settings, or first let's go and pick the URL. This is going to be our URL from URL endpoints. And the public key is going to be under settings or developer options, API keys, and this is the public key. Let's copy it and add it here as the public key. It should end with this equal sign. It's okay. Now, because we updated the environment variables, we need to restart our server. So I'm going to stop it and restart it so that new environments are loaded. I can do here or empty string so that TypeScript is fine with it. Let's do reload to load the new application, and let's go back to the documentation because we are not done yet. Now that we have the ImageKit, we are going to export two functions. Get ImageKit URL from source, and actually I need only this one, get ImageKit URL from path. So let me copy it, but without module, or yeah, let's copy it together. And add it also in the ImageKit as a helper function. Instead of module export, let's do export const get image equal function, where we can replace it with an arrow function. The image path is going to be a string. The transformation array is going to be an array of objects or object array or just array of any for now. And transformation position is going to be transformation path I don't need transformation position for now. Maybe we're gonna add it a bit later, so I'm gonna remove it. So this function will receive the image path, and it will give us a URL that we can render an image with. Last step is to actually go ahead and import this get ImageKit URL from path inside our application asset on the page that we are rendering this image. So instead of rendering this local image, instead of asset URI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do const URI equal to get ImageKit URL from path that we're going to import from our utils. We're going to calculate the path based on, let's start with a hard-coded string with the user ID and then the file name that we have here. So this is my user ID, replace it with your user ID, and this is the image name. I took them from storage. If you go into the assets, the folder name, and then the file name. And the second one is going to be the array of transformation. If we leave it empty, it's not going to have any transformations, but it will allow us to render the image. So let's actually comment it back out and render the URI directly from ImageKit. Now, if I open it up, here we have it, the image loaded from ImageKit. And if we add here transformations, for example, width 200, height 200, it's going to be automatically transformed. To see it better in action, we can do with 2020. It's going to be a very low resolution image, and we can apply other transformations as well. So that's how we use ImageKit here in our application, in our React Native application. We can look at some more examples for image resizing with a transformation height with a crop mode, keeping up an aspect ratio when cropping. We can do rotations. We can add overlays. For example, a text overlay. I can take this one and add it here as the second one, and we see ImageKit. Or we can do notjust.dev. Just like that, we have an image. And font size 30 is going to make it smaller. And maybe the color is going to be 000000. Or maybe FFF for white. That's it. Yeah, super easy. You can use these approaches to add watermarks to your images. We can do even an image overlay. If you want to add, for example, your logos and a lot more that you can find here in the transform and adapt. Okie dokie. Okay, so the only thing is that now we are only showing like one specific image, always. The next step is going to be to add properly. Like, let me go ahead and do git add, git commit -m ImageKit integration. And the next step is to properly decide like if we want to render a local image, a remote image, depending whether the asset has been backed up or not yet. So that is the next step is going to be around synchronization. Synchronization. Okay, what's going to be our strategy around synchronization? Let's think a little bit about it. Hello, Tao. How are you doing? So our images, they can be in 3 states. Initially, the image is local only. So the image only lives on the device. The next step, when it's in this state, we want to back up this image remotely. Then it goes into the next step, when we have an image both locally and remotely. And later, the user might decide to delete the local image, but we want to keep the image remotely. So the last state is when there is no local image, there is only the backed up image, the remote image. For that reason, we need a way to identify local and remote images, understand the connection between them, also be able to check if a local image is already backed up or not, so that we know like whether we have to back it up or not. For that, we should use the image IDs. Like if I look here, if I go into the asset, let's do a console log asset, maybe a JSON stringify asset with null and 2. We're gonna see that in our buckets, the only thing that we have right now is the name of the image. The name of the image from the bucket and the name of the image locally. They are matching, but I don't think that it's a good strategy to rely on the name to make this connection, because maybe later we can rename the local file, maybe there would be 2 files with the same name if the one is deleted or not. So relying on the name, I don't think it's a smart idea. We need to rely on the ID, which is a unique identifier identifying this local image, and we need to somehow also identify the remote images from our Supabase with the same ID, so that later we can see like if they are synchronized or not. The thing is that Supabase, like, we need to add the ID, which is metadata about a file. If we look into the storage, into the objects in the database, we see that Supabase is currently adding user metadata, which is an object with custom information about that file. We would really need that now to add this identifier so that later we can check it with a file. But the thing is that this is a super new thing being added right as we speak. Supabase user metadata storage. Supabase storage user metadata. Here, this is something that is being added as we speak. If we look at this issue, even 4 days ago, they are working on it. So very soon, this is going to be possible because on the database, it's there, but on the front end, when we upload from, for example, media provider in the Supabase storage, here we don't have user metadata yet. Metadata. That's where we would be able to write that ID that we need. So in future, it will be a bit easier. For now, what we are going to do is we are going to create a separate table that we define and have access to. And under our table editor, public, and we're going to store some metadata, some information about files in this table. Later, we can query it, see if a file is already synced up or not. So let's go ahead under table editor, under public schema, and do create table. Let's call it also assets, and let's go ahead under the columns. What information do we need to know about an asset? Well, we need to know its path from the storage. So let's save a path here as a text. We need to know the user ID that is going to be connected with the actual user using a foreign key. So under foreign key, I'm going to click add foreign key relationship to the authentication schema with the users table by connecting the asset user ID to the ID of a user. This way, a file is going to be connected directly with an authenticated user. And with actions, when a user is updated, we want to update the file ID as well. And when the user is removed, we want to remove the file as well. So cascade, cascade. Save. Now this user ID got the UUID type. And another thing that we need to know about this asset is what storage object it links to. So object ID, which is going to be another key, another relationship, but in this case it's going to be with the storage schema with the objects. We want to link the object ID with the storage object ID. We add this one because by providing here cascade and cascade, whenever a file is going to be deleted from the storage, it will automatically be deleted from this table as well. This way, we're going to keep it in sync without having deleted files that we have in database and so on. So this is powerful. This is why I love Postgres, and especially SQL databases for their relationships and being able to keep everything in sync. Another thing that I will add that we will need a bit later, if we look in the media library, we see that there should be a media type, right? A media type which will be either a photo or a video. So let's add a media type because later we will support also videos. Let's add a media type here. But let me check something. How is it called? I want it exactly to be the same name as the one from locally. Media type. Media type. Yeah, it's called media type. So let's call it. I will break a bit the convention because the convention is to use underscore, but I will put media type just to be the same as the one that we will get from the media. This is going to be a enum or actually a normal text. What I'm going to do, I'm going to say that all of these values I will deselect is nullable to make them required, because a file needs a path, needs a relationship with a user, needs an object ID, and needs a media type, which I might provide a default value. How's it called? Photo. So default value photo. Is this everything that we need here? So path, user ID, object ID, media type. Let me try to remember what else do we need there. Where is it? ID, path, user ID, and object ID. Yeah. That's the field that we need here. Let's click save. Let's click save. Good. Now, because we don't have any policies yet, users won't be able to interact with this table. So it's denied by default. Let's click add RLS policy and let's click create policy here. What we want to do is we want to allow insert for authenticated users only. So this default template insert is okay for us. Let's click save policy. And we need to create another policy to enable read access, but I don't want to enable it for everyone. I want to enable it only for your own data. And I will look at this delete. Look at this delete because it has this based on user ID. And I will copy line 7. I will then move back to enable read access for all users. And I'm going to replace line 7 from true to this check. I want to check if user ID is equal to the ID of a user that is doing the request. Then target role authenticated. And let's actually do, select. Make sure to have this changed. Now enable read access for owners. Save policy. So now we can insert, we can select. And if we're gonna need delete and update, we're gonna come back and create our policies as well. But for now, I think that's good. And we can go back in our code. And when we call sync to cloud from media provider, after we upload to the storage, what I want to do is I want to also insert an item in our database. So let's do await Supabase dot from. The table name is called assets. What I want to do there is I want to also upsert. Well, but upsert means that it can update as well. So just before we finish the code, I'm gonna go back to the auth policies of my assets table and create a new policy with the same strategy. I'm gonna select the delete, I'm gonna copy this line 7, then I'm gonna select update, and here I'm gonna replace line 7 and line 9 with this check UUID equal user ID. And for the name based on ID. Let's do save policy. And now we have insert, select, and update. Coming back to our project, we are going to upsert. And here we need to provide the fields that we need to write. We have ID, we have path, we have user ID, we have media type like this. What else do we have? What fields do we have? an object ID. So these are the fields that we need to provide. Where will we start? The ID, we said that we want to match it with the asset ID. So we have an asset, let's call asset.id. By doing this, we will be able to query based on the user asset ID to know like if it's backed up or not. The path, we're gonna take it from this data because this is the storage response. And if I comment out this one and do console log, let's rename it from data to remote or stored file. And let's do console log stored file. If I press on this upload, we're gonna see there is a full path, and there is also a path that has only the folder and the name. It doesn't have the bucket. So let's take the path from this stored file and save it in the path storefile.path. User ID, we're going to take it from user.id from authentication, and media type is going to be asset.media type. Object ID is going to be this stored file.id. And stored file is possibly null. I'm going to do a check here. If stored file, only then sync it with our assets table. Okay, let's see data and error. This is going to be upload error. And this is going to be data error. Let's do a console log data error. Now, if everything is fine, we need to, after uploading, we need to have, no, we don't. We have invalid input syntax because, yeah, I know why. Because this ID, asset ID, is of type string. But when we created the table, under public assets, let's do edit table, our ID was int8. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change it to a text. Where is text? Text. Let's save. Failed. I need to recreate it because I cannot change the ID. So let's try to recreate it quickly. Let's do create table, name assets. It has, first of all, ID of type text. It has path of type text. Then it has media type of type text. Default photo. Is it true? Photo. It has user ID and object ID. All of them are going to be required, so let's deselect is nullable. And let's add the foreign keys. First, we will connect with the user who is authenticated based on the user ID and here ID. And the actions will be cascade and cascade. And then our foreign key is going to be with storage objects from object ID to ID, again, cascade, cascade, save. Hopefully I did them correctly. Let's try to save. Cool. And let's try again to upload a new file. New row, oh. And because it's a new table, we need to add policies for insert to authenticated users. Create policy. From delete, we copy the 7th row and we move to insert and we add it here. Not to insert, to select. So that only users can read only their data. And the same for update. Users can update only their data. Now, if I do upload, null and null. That's good because the second one is the error, so the error is null. If I'm gonna check here under the table editor assets, we're gonna see a new asset. If I expand the row, we see ID is the ID of the asset that we have also locally, the path to the image, the media type, the user that it belongs to, and the object ID that it is linked to. Perfect. Now that will power our synchronization engine. That's the table we will query to understand if a local asset is already backed up or not, and will allow us to back them up. Whew. Let's go ahead and do that. What do we have so far? Git status. Providers, media provider. Asset. Git add, git commit -m. That is store asset metadata. But remember we had null. That's okay at this moment, but later we will need information about that object that we created. To do that, after you call upsert, you can do .select, and this will return an array of objects that were inserted. And if you do .single, it's only going to get the first element, and because we only upload one, the data is going to be an object. So if now I will do upload, it's supposed to get information about the newly created object in the database. Okay. Look what we are going to do next. So as I said, because now we have this database of assets with IDs that match the ID of locally stored assets, what we can do is we can check if a local asset is already backed up. So when loading local assets, we need one more extra step. We need to check if it's backed up or not. That's going to happen here in the media provider where we load local assets. we load local assets, we have a list of them here in the assets page, and before we set them in state, we need to loop through them and check if there are assets in that array that are already backed up. So, I'm gonna try not to confuse you. So what do we need to do? Well, we have assets.page, assets page.assets, which is an array of local assets. Now we need to loop through all of them, and we're gonna do that using a map. A map, why not for each? Because the function that we need to execute is going to be an asynchronous function. And here we need to add our check if asset is already backed up. Because this is an async function, mapping over an array and returning an async function means that we're gonna get an array of promises. When we have an array of promises and we want to get an array of results, we can use the promise.all, put this created array of promises in this promise.all, and then using new assets equal await, using await, we are going to await the response of all of these functions that will check every single assets in parallel if it's backed up or not, and the results will be stored here in the new assets. So, how do we check if an asset is already backed up or not? We check how many items in our database with this asset ID. So here we're gonna have the asset that we are checking for. So let's do here something like await Supabase dot from the table assets. We can either select and filter, but because what we actually want to do is just check if there are items or not, we can use the count method. So in the API documentation, read rows, it's not here. Anyway, we just need to know the count. So in the select, we're gonna say select everything, and in the options we're gonna do count exact, not estimated, and then head true. But what do we want to count? Not all the items in the assets table, but only the one that have the ID equal to the asset.id that we are looking at. And this one will give us the count, right? The count. Now, using this count, we can understand if the asset is backed up or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return an object that has all the information about the asset, but also has an additional property called is backed up, that is going to be true only if count is more than 0. But count can also be null, so I'm gonna do if count and count is more than 0. Only then we can assume that the item is backed up, because there is an item in our assets table with the same ID as this asset. Now, because this is what we return from this promise, from this async function, the new assets will have an array of these items. So if I do here console log JSON stringify new assets null and then 2. Let's see what are going to be the response. We see that all these objects have the same fields, but they also have is backed up with the value 0. Value is 0 because here count should be transformed to a true or false. So I'm gonna add double negation. So now is backed up is false, but some of them I believe should be true. Let's see. Can I do a search here? True. Yes. This one is backed up is true because the item with this ID from local storage is the same item with this ID in the database. That means it's backed up. Oh my god, perfect. So what do we do with this information? Is backed up, true. Let's take these new assets and instead of setting them in the state. So I will set them here in the state. Now what I can do is for the items that are not backed up, I will render a simple icon on this image. So by going into the tabs index, inside the image, let's render here an icon. In vector icons, or let's do the same backup icon that we had there. Where is the backup icon? This one. Anti-design, cloud upload. But it doesn't need on-press event. It just will show it. Let's import it from vector icons. I will add here some, let's add class name, absolute. Let's do right or right 5 or right 1 and bottom 1. Okay, it's displayed on the bottom. The size can be 18 and the color can be white. Okay, that's good. And I'll render it only if item.is backed up is false. So if it's false, I will render the icon that suggests that it needs to be backed up. And if I'm gonna go here and upload this image, hopefully it worked. And if I will reload, now this item does not have the backup logo. Okay, we don't have a lot of time left, but I still have a lot of things that I want to show you. So this item is backed up. That means that. Okay. So let's do it this way. Currently, we are only loading local assets. This file is backed up, it's in cloud, but we see it here only because it's still in our media library. If we'd remove it from the media library, I'm not gonna see it anymore. However, in a Google Photos application, we would want to first see the items from cloud that we store in cloud and only then feed them in with the media library. So that means that we need to fetch the list of images from remote. To do that, let's go ahead and fetch the remote images. So I'm going to add here const remote assets, set remote assets equal use state. It's going to be an empty array. Now when we simply open the application, use effect, I want to load the remote assets. Similar to how we have load local assets, let's add here load remote assets. And this one is going to work using Supabase. So I'm going to get data and error using await Supabase dot from assets dot select all the fields. And I don't need to do equal sign like user ID is equal to my user ID, because this is automatically going to happen based on the row level rules. Like we are only allowed to fetch our data. So by doing this way, we are only going to get our data. And I can do set remote assets with data. Let me check. Actually, a console log data is gonna help us understand console log remote. Let's see if we have anything. Reload. We didn't call load remote assets. We need to do that in the use effect that we prepared here. So let's call it here. Okay, so we have an array with data, with remote data. Cool. Now, what I want to do is I want to merge them together. I want to merge the remote assets with the local assets. To do that, let's do const assets is going to be equal to all the remote assets and all the local assets. However, in this case, we might have duplicated assets because an image can be both local and remote. So what I'm going to do is from local assets, I'm going to filter and I'm going to keep only the assets that has the is backed up field as false. So only the assets that still needs backup. Because if it's backed up, it's going to be inside the remote assets. Now I'm going to take these assets and I'm going to export from our media provider here like assets like this. Cool. Something is happening. We have first two items. These are the remote assets and they are blank. Why? Well, that's because the URI is a remote one. So we need to apply some changes there. But how will we differentiate if it's a remote one or not? Load remote assets. Let's go ahead and when we set them there, let's map through this data. And for every remote asset, let's keep all their fields, remote asset, but also add is cloud asset. Or maybe the other way around, to add them here. Yeah, I'm gonna do the other way around. I'm gonna keep the cloud assets original, but to the local ones, besides is backup, I'm gonna do is local asset is going to be true. So if is local asset is true, we know that we simply have to render it. Otherwise, we need to render it using ImageKit. So that is going to happen. Let's first do that on this page. If I go into the asset page, let's do it this way. Image URI. Let's do if asset is local asset. That's how we called it here. Yes. Then the URI is going to be equal to asset.uri. Otherwise, it's going to be this one. And we need to define this URI at the top, saying let URI. And if it's local, it's simply going to get the local one. If it's remote, it's going to apply these transformations. Now we take this URI and we give it here. And now we are supposed to see both local images like this, but also remote images like this. Perfect. It works. And if I go ahead and upload this one to cloud and then reload, we can check the third one as well. And now this one is backed up as well. So the only thing is that in the index where we have a flat list, where we have the image, let's go ahead and maybe do here the following, like the same if statement, but in a question mark operation way. So in the index where we set the URI, if asset is local asset, then take the item URI. Otherwise, take the get image URL from path with these transformations. Maybe we don't need all the transformations there. We need to import this from ImageKit. And it's not going to be this one. It's going to be, you know what? Yeah, that was a bit of a mistake. It should be item.path because that's the field we saved in the database. I don't need the second transformation. I don't need the comma here. So item path 200 over 200. Asset doesn't exist. It's not asset, it's item. Okay, now it works. Now it works. Item is backed up. Why does it say that it's... Oh, because is backed up. Let's do not is backed up. If item is not backed up and item is local asset, only then we want to render this one. Because if it's remote, it's already backed up. So now this one works, this one works. But how does it work? Wait a second, how does it work? No, asset. If I go here, is local asset is true. Is backed up is true as well. Oh, Yeah, this one is local as well, because it has both local and remote, which is not bad, because now if I go ahead and remove this one from the library, from my photos, I don't know which one exactly, I think it's these trees. If I delete, and this one, the trees, I deleted them, and if I go back here and reload, in this case this is not a local image, this is a remote one, and it says asset not found because of the ID, right? Get asset by ID. Yes, get asset by ID from the media provider should, where, get asset by ID, should not look only for local assets but for all the assets. Now if I press on this one, that, yes, that's right. Get ImageKit URL from path is going to be asset.path. Perfect. And I will comment out this transformation. And maybe in this case it doesn't need to be that small, it can be 500 over 500. Yeah, I will just do with 500 and leave the full image as it was. So the way it works is, if it's local, it's going to display local. If it's both local and remote, as this one, it's still going to be displaying the local one to save some bandwidth. But if it's only remote, like this one, it's going to load it from ImageKit from the remote part. Okay, so that is the proper merge between remote and local images. So let's do git. Okay, git status, git add, git commit. Remote and local images. Remote and local images. And another thing that I wanted to show you, we have 10 more minutes, is the video support. The video support is not that complicated. We just need to have a video here. And actually we do have a video. If we go ahead and when loading local assets in the media provider, when we do load local assets, get assets sync, we can specify the media type, which is an array that we can specify media type, media library.mediatype.photo, and also .video. By default, it's only going to load photos. If I do video as well, we can see that it will load a video as well. I will reload. There should be a video. There should be a video. Where is it? Oh, come on. Here. We see the thumbnail of a video. What I like about Expo image is that by providing a video URI, it's going to show the thumbnail. Here is the thumbnail. And in order to make it play, we're going to use Expo AV. Expo AV is a library that allows us to run videos and audio. So let's go ahead and install it first. I'm going to install it like this, Expo AV. And I'm going to use, to render it, the video, on the details page of the asset. I'm going to say if asset.mediatype equal to photo, then render the image, otherwise render the video. Video should be imported from Expo AV. I don't need the reference. For the style, I can do width 100%, height 100%. For the source, I'm going to do simply URI the same way, use native controls, resize mode, let's import it, is looping, and this one we don't need. And just like that, if I'm gonna go and open the video up like this, it's not working. But why? Let's think. URI is local asset. Yes, it's local, so it's going to be URI. But if it's photo, it's photo. 100%, 100%. Use native controls. Background color red. Come on, we need the video. So there is the height, there is the resize mode, contain. Why? Oh, because when it's a video, the URI, if it's a video, we need the full URI using the file system. Oh, we are running out of time. In the media provider, let's do it this way. When we load local assets, when we do all of this stuff, let's do it this way. If asset dot type media type equal to video, then let's do URI equal asset dot URI. The default is going to be the one that we see there. But if the media type is video, the URI let is going to be await file system dot, not file system, media library dot file read get file asset info async asset dot local URI. That's what we are interested in. And we're going to take this URI and add it here. Now, if I reload, all the images should remain the same, but the video is going to have a local URI. If I'm going to open it up, yes, now we can play it properly. And if I upload it, let's see what's happening. We are running out of time. If I upload it, let's see, we have the media type, it should be video here. Refresh. Media type, asset media type. Why it's not that? But anyway, let's see what will happen if I remove it locally, because with ImageKit, everything is going to work as it is. So if I reload, it was not synchronized with a cloud. It was not synchronized with a cloud, but guys, we are running out of time. So the thing is that everything for the video transformation is going to work similar to how it's working with the images. So out of the box, you can apply the same transformations as we were applying to the photos, and we can optimize the height, the resizing, adding overlays on top of the videos, adding watermarks, and all the common transformations and even audio transformations on the videos as well as creating thumbnails. So we have to stop the live stream, but I will make sure to add these changes to the source code so that you can have access to them and see what changes do we have to do. But I'm pretty sure everything is working. I was just not patient enough to upload the video to the storage. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you very much, ImageKit, for making this tutorial possible. If you loved it, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a thumbs up, and I will see you next time with